Let's examine how we can mould a future for the digital industry here in the Northeast. The idea would be by creating diverse pathways into tech careers. We've already talked about that pipeline. Chairing this panel is Cate Kalson, Director of Oliver Wyman in Newcastle. And like the last chair from the last big panel for RIA, Cate's another brilliant addition to our region with a scientific background. And by that, I mean not just messing around in a physics lab at school. I mean a PhD in microbiology, which followed her master's in biochemistry from Oxford. She has this need for data. It's at her core. So especially helping our clients make data-driven decisions. So this is a foundation for the specialist quantitative analytics team. That's what she set up here in Newcastle. So perfect person, in fact, to lead this panel where we're looking at diverse pathways into tech careers. Joining Cate is Andrew Esson, Director of Industrial Strategy at Newcastle College. We have Don Murphy, the founder of Geek Talent. Karen Marshall is an Apprentice Education and Engagement Lead at Accenture. And James Conway is Head of Operations of Bingo, actually, at Tombola. As well as that, you may see Lindsay Phillips again, Executive Vice President of Sage Product Delivery. And as well as that, we have James Dentith, who's Head of Employer Engagement at Baltic Apprenticeships. So all of these people will be here online, ready to discuss. And chairing this debate is Cate Kalson.
Thanks, Charlie. So yes, great to have everybody here in the panel. I can see the numbers are just climbing a little bit. So before we get started and while we're waiting for people to join, I've got a couple of polls I'd like to launch because the panel are keen to know kind of who's listening. So if we could launch the first poll, which is around the size of your organisation, that would be fantastic. So please navigate to the polls tab and let us know who do you work for and how big is your organisation. And I guess the reason we want to ask this question is I've got a great panel here, mixture of SMEs through to kind of large corporate leaders. And we're really aware within this talent conversation that the kind of both the approach and the resources available within different sizes of organizations are very different. And everyone's got a different starting point when it comes to this kind of conversation around how do we both grow, drive growth, find the talent we need to grow our businesses, but also have diversity at kind of the heart of that, and be sure that what we're doing with that kind of talent strategy and that talent acquisition strategy is supporting the broader economy and industry to be diverse and to represent the communities that we live in. Okay, so we've got a pretty good read now of organisations. So there's a spread, but there are actually kind of a decent proportion of large employers represented in the room. I think that should be helpful for our panelists to think about how they're positioning things. So can we flip to the next poll? I'd like to ask you kind of what experience level of new hires do you primarily focus on? So clearly kind of there is a probably not a black and white answer on this next question, but can we get to the second poll? So the way we've kind of positioned this question is really to understand how much are you doing kind of what we would call new to role. So people often say entry level, but it doesn't necessarily mean no work experience or young necessarily, or kind of but do you have new to role kind of options available for hiring? Do you look for relatively early career but with some experience, or do you mostly focus on kind of very experienced people in your talent strategy? So one of the things that we're really focused on as Dynamo is talent pipeline, which is actually really around that kind of entry to digital, new to role kind of part of the pipeline. How do we bring more people into the industry, which we know needs more talent? We need that kind of growing proportion of people working in digital. 1 in 5 of all jobs advertised are digital, whether that's in tech companies or within more established in industries. So really interested to kind of get the debate started with the panel on what's going on at the moment in that new hires to new to digital roles kind of hiring pathway. So if we can have the panelists enter the room, that would be great. Charlie has already introduced you all, but I'll remind everyone. So Lindsay joins us from Sage, Dom from Geek Talent. See who's coming in next. Have we got Andrew, James and Karen, hopefully. So maybe while we're waiting for them to join, Linz, do you want to kick us off and just talk a little bit about how you're approaching talent strategy at Sage, and with a particular focus on the kind of those diverse pathways into tech careers?
Yeah, sure. So I think most importantly, we've been hiring a lot throughout the pandemic, including bringing graduates on as part of that. And obviously, as a consequence of the pandemic, a lot of the people we've hired, we've not met yet. And that's made it kind of interesting for everybody that's joined us. But in terms of our approach to hiring, I mean, we hire across all the different roles we have in Sage up here in the Northeast, which means we're hiring finance people, we're hiring technologists, we're hiring people to be part of our customer services teams, you know, the whole spectrum. And I think, you know, in terms of trying to create diversity in that group of people that we're hiring, it's a lot about mix. So it's a lot about making sure that we don't just hire at one level. It's also about trying to make sure that when we recruit, we appeal from an outbound messaging and advertising perspective to people of all types, so that there's a natural diversity in the applications that we receive, which means that, you know, we get a good representation of the population that we're recruiting from, rather than just, you know, adverts that specifically, and let's take a technology example, specifically kind of male, kind of engineering, technology focused people, which, you know, the industry typically has had a propensity to be made up of. So I think it very much starts with getting your outbound messaging right, getting your talent attraction campaigns right, so that as a company, you know, you're attractive to a wide and diverse group of individuals that might want to come and work for you. And that means not only getting the messaging right, but also offering roles at different levels within the organization. And interestingly, we've got a leadership conference going on at the moment, and it's our top 242, which is, I know, a very precise number, but 42% of that group are women, which is a really, I think, great reflection of some of the diversity that we've got in the leadership of our company. It's got to start top down as well, you know, because within that population, there's a lot of different role models that you know, people see from both inside and outside of Sage. And I think that's also part of, you know, how do you go about attracting diverse talent into your organization. You're on mute, by the way.
Sorry.
That's all right.
That makes a lot of sense. Dom, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you kind of you know, work with clients, really, to sort of almost use the data to show them how they could maybe think a little bit differently about sources of talent and kind of, and those career pathways that many of us know are not linear. You know, it's the kind of wiggly career, and how can that in itself actually help you to be more diverse around how you think about hiring and recruitment?
Yeah, sure. So our approach is we provide data analytics tools to support talent development, pipeline development, and really our focus is really on explaining the world of work to young people in terms of early careers. And I think in technology, we just like to make it really complicated, right? So when we look at the job market, as you said there, about 1 in 5 jobs are tech jobs. But the problem is we've got, at the last count, we've got 13,000 different job titles of the way we describe those tech jobs across the whole of the UK. So there are really about 30 job clusters that things cluster into, but we just love making new names for the same thing, like mid-weight, back-end developer, or data engineer is the new one, data pipeline engineer, data scientist, data analyst. We really need to get our act together about standardizing on job roles and job specifications to attract people, because that's the first thing. The second thing is technology roles, the way that we educate people is quite interesting. But again, it's that confusion about what jobs actually exist. So when you look at the job roles that are available, particularly I'll talk about entry-level careers. Okay, so there are predominantly 3 main entry routes that people are advertising for. You've got the software developer as an entry-level role. You've got IT support, which is actually a massive part, which covers things like help desk and cybersecurity, those sort of roles. Okay, but generally cybersecurity is more advanced. Okay, so it's really like a network engineer with extra skills, and then some of the other ones more around analytical roles like business analyst and some of those other softer roles. But you generally get 3 or 4 roles that dominate the entry-level job market that account for sort of 50 to 60% of all demand across the whole of the UK. So I think what we need to do is simplify the messaging and get the messaging right, but focus in on the actual entry-level pathway and then where they can lead to, without talking about 13,000 different job options, variations for the same thing. So I think that will really help, is simplify the message, talk about career pathways. There's a huge amount of variety once you're in, but we need to get people to get in and want to get in and want to go into those entry-level roles. That's probably my view.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I've been doing a few focus groups with university students and talking to Newcastle University students who I would say high caliber young people, they will still talk about the tech industry as intimidating, particularly and I've purposely been talking to those who aren't studying computer science or things which they've already kind of specified. I think that's one of our big challenges, is how do we make those roles feel approachable, and also how do we link them to people's interests and skills that they definitely have demonstrated and developed in their studies to whichever point, or in their work to the point at which they're now trying to consider. And so I think I agree with you, Dom, that there's a huge opportunity there for us to talk with a louder, clearer voice to people outside of our industry around what working, what those first roles can look like, but also how they lead to things in the future. Great, we've got everyone on the line now. Hello. Karen, I wonder whether you want to come in on that point, around, what are you doing at Accenture to really kind of start to try and talk about roles within technology and digital in a bit of a different way, to maybe how it's been historically talked about, to attract more diverse candidates and people just to be interested in roles within technology where they maybe wouldn't have considered it before.
Yeah, I think it's just really interesting to reach out and give people the opportunity just to try and to have a go, and some really short sessions. So we do lots of very short 1-hour sessions with charities out in normal times out on their premises, and in COVID times we do lots online just to help people get over the fear. And actually one of the things we've found about doing some of this work virtually at the minute is that people are more inclined to sign up and have a go when they're not having to travel all the way to a building and be seen in front of everyone else. It's almost like an anonymous way of having a go. So we do find that sometimes people surprise themselves when they just try little bits of coding or working with data or little bits of design, and then our hope is that would then encourage them to participate in a longer term program where they can then really get into it and make sure it is something that they have that interest in. So working with really diverse charities, we've even had a lot of interest from people in Blackpool and Rochdale and Cornwall and all over, and from who are on programs to help them re-explore and evaluate new opportunities if they've been furloughed long term or made redundant. So it has been really interesting. And then the other thing we've done is we've piloted and are now doing a second phase of recruitment for a careers program for people with degrees in non-technical subjects. So again, enabling people to really find a way to change career where it's supported, and the earnings are a bit higher for our masters. We're doing a conversion masters, so they're not on a basic apprentice salary, they're earning a bit more. So I do think we can work with people at different levels, different entry levels into the tech career community, if you like, and support them along the way.
Yep, that sounds really good, Karen. James, Conway, do you want to add some? I know Tombola are very active kind of regionally in thinking about kind of career pathways and diversity and how to get people from our regional communities into tech careers. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing at Tombola?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we care a lot about. Something we're always trying to get better at as well. I think we're kind of lucky at Tombola as well, is that we're not just a tech business. We have huge teams of people who look after our players, and that they're not tech roles. But we have got quite a few examples of people moving over from that side of the business into the operational teams. So we're quite lucky in that sense. But outside of that, yeah, we do. We've got apprentices, graduate schemes. We do every year. Again, we're trying to get better at that all of the time. We're just coming up to a new kind of graduate recruitment program, and there's conversations internally in terms of how we can make that better. So I think one of the recent stats at Tombola, we've been recruiting for the last 6 months. We're kind of always recruiting for tech roles, and I think in the last 6 months we've had kind of 70 CVs of kind of came in, and before any filtering, out of those 70 CVs, I think there was only 3 that were women. So internally, we're talking about how we can kind of reach out to the universities and kind of reach out to the women at the universities on the computer science degrees and stuff like that to see if we can improve that percentage, that split. It's not great.
So that's kind of how we've heard now from sort of more the employer perspective. Andrew, would you like to sort of tell us a little bit more around how you're doing work at Newcastle College to encourage the learn with you, think about technology careers, maybe when it hasn't been all the way through their kind of education or work experience, where they've been focused, sort of how are you trying to spread the word really around kind of the breadth of opportunities and also the types of backgrounds that can be really suited to technology.
Definitely, yeah. So for us, one of our big objectives is to really create diverse pathways into digital. And we as a college, so we're involved in programs that go from almost level 0 to level 6. So for the uninitiated, that's level 0 is no digital skills whatsoever. So people in areas of digital poverty. Level 6 is a BSc honours degree. And the ideal pathway we're trying to create is working with third sectors and others to get people in digital poverty using digital, and hopefully some of those may prove to be digital gurus, digital geniuses who can go all the way through the spectrum with us. So I mean, we offer honours degrees, we offer apprenticeships. One thing that I find, I guess, a mild frustration at times with employers, and I've been an employer myself, is that employers can often be monochromatic in terms of how they onboard people. And I've met many businesses who have been founded by graduates who will tend to recruit graduates and see apprenticeships as something that's really scary and really time consuming and takes a lot of supervision and nursemaiding and just won't touch them. And for me, I guess the thing I would challenge everyone to do is to think that it's about innovation. And at business level, innovation in its simplest terms is doing something new. So if one of your challenges as a business is recruiting skilled people into your business, innovate and try a different route from the one you've generally used.
Yeah, that's really important, because if you carry on doing the same thing that you've been doing, you're going to get the same result broadly, albeit I think there are, at every sort of point in the system there's a lot of drive for diversity. James, I'm keen to kind of get your perspectives on that, particularly on that apprenticeship point from a Baltic perspective. How are you kind of working with employers, and are you seeing kind of a bit of momentum around the employers really considering apprenticeships alongside other maybe tried and tested talent acquisition routes?
Yeah, I think COVID has been really interesting on the apprenticeship front, with us being focused on tech and digital. And a lot of businesses either centralizing themselves around working virtually or exploring new avenues. Like Andrew said, innovation is now key and sits at the heart of every business. So people are more open to exploring new avenues. Now, diversity and inclusivity is at the heart of what our recent expansion plans have been, and that's what we want to continue developing. So year on year, we're seeing around 100% increase in, which is a fantastic starting point for our journey. What has really led to that is our focus and our mantra of support. So whether that's to apprentices during the recruitment process and through their apprenticeship, or to employers, new or old, getting to grips with onboarding an apprentice environment or equally in a virtual one, to ensure that each one is treated as the individual they are, and we can adhere to any extra needs that that individual might have to make sure that it is a success.
That makes sense. And I think another thing I've certainly learned about apprenticeship providers over the past couple of years of working with different organisations is the amount of support that they actually offer. And that's often discounted as a kind of, part of really what apprenticeship levy fund is, like, say, whether it's sourcing candidates and really helping you to think about where to go looking for diverse candidates, all the way through to then how you're going to support maybe a more diverse group than you've historically had. I certainly think that apprenticeship providers are one of the places where that innovation is really active. So I think that's really important for everyone to consider. Something I think is common across everyone innovating in this space, of which many of you are, is partnerships, and how you kind of choose partners to work with as you're developing your talent strategy. I wonder whether, Linz, you could talk a little bit about kind of other organisations that you've been working closely with or are looking to work with at Sage to help you to really execute on your ambitions in this space.
So maybe if I touch on some of the stuff we've been doing, both with some of the local authorities as well as the IET and Lego, which is very much along the theme of how do you inspire the next generation of technologists to come into your organisation. So quite a long time ago, North Tyneside Council approached me for a little bit of financial help with running a Lego League final competition. And at the time, I was paying for cups of tea and coffee and stuff, and I didn't quite realise what I was getting myself into. But 6 or 7 years on, we've routinely had a couple of hundred children in Sage competing with Lego robots over a couple of days. Now, obviously, we've not done that through the pandemic, and it will run actually this year as a virtual event. But I think that the importance of that partnership, which is across North Tyneside Council and their learning folks, the IET who are pushing the STEM agenda across the UK, and Lego who sell us the places on the Lego League and the Lego Mindstorm robots that the kids use, is I think one way that we can create that inspiration of what it can be like to work in a technology environment, but also create a vehicle to bring children into our offices, potentially have some of our people that visit their school and do some mentoring, and create a resonance, if you like, of what does that big shiny office building really look and feel like inside, and what are the people like, to make it accessible. And it's something I'm really proud of what we've achieved, actually, because the inspiration it's created for some of the children that have been involved has been quite incredible. And one of the things we were able to do for some of the teams that were very successful in the competition itself was fund travel for them to go down to Bristol to compete in the finals. And again, it's all about just creating that resonance, that accessibility of Sage as a potential future employer at a very, very early stage. We're talking 9, 10, 11-year-olds, some of whom had never been out in the Northeast before. And that's just one of the partnerships we have. We have other things going on. We've been doing a bit of work with veterans. We're also working with a local charity in terms of how do we place people into roles who've either had a career break or have been struggling to find a path back into work. And again, it's kind of what we talked about very early on, which is how do you create different avenues and different vehicles to bring people into the workplace who may otherwise struggle, and make it easy, because once you get going on a period of employment, the skills build, the capability kind of shines through, but it's not always very easy to get through that initial barrier. So the STEM thing's very much about inspiring the next generation of technologists, which we absolutely need to do, and closer proximity from an industry point of view with education, I think, is hugely helpful. But equally, it's also about finding avenues for people who may feel excluded by the situation they're in, to be able to find a path into your organisation.
And I guess the kind of the thing you're doing there is really trying to like use those partners for their expertise, Linz, around how to do that outreach effectively and how to create those, not expecting that as an organisation necessarily, say you're the experts in that, but it's
absolutely, and it's that expertise and access that I think partnership can really help with. We've got a couple of things in the pipe, and over the coming weeks and months, hopefully you'll hear a bit more about those, where we're trying to expand some of that.
Karen, I know Accenture also works in partnership model with a number of different organisations. Perhaps you could talk about a couple of those again, just to showcase what those partners are really doing for you and how that's enabling you to have more impact.
Yeah, it's so much. There's lots of organisations out there who are well established and working out in those real cold spot communities and with women's groups and younger and older organisations, and they're really trusted and valued in those communities. So by partnering with them, it really gives you an easy access, and in a way, and you're helping them reach their targets as well if they want to upskill and give people the opportunity to try new things or to, progress and change careers through different routes. So some of the partnerships, especially in lockdown, we're part of Business in the Community's Responsible Business Network, and that has enabled us to reach all across the country to lots of different projects that they've been involved in and sponsored. So that has worked really well to try to reach and support others. And then there's lots of really great local organisations that are there to help, that can signpost, but they're also running and delivering organisations, and even some of the umbrella organisations like Vaughan and Voda, even work through the local authorities and the LEPs. Then there's all different kinds of charities and organisations that we've been working with as well. So it's absolutely worthwhile having a look through organisations in your community, or by sitting on different groups, even the Chamber of Commerce's education and skills groups, and you can find out about lots of different activities that are happening through those.
Yeah, and that sounds great. In terms of the breadth of different organisations, I guess sometimes that can be the challenge, right? I know certainly for SMEs, the challenge can be there's so much out there. It's kind of like, how do you pick something to focus on? And James, I don't know from a tombola perspective whether you could talk a little bit around, how do you navigate that, and where does the drive in tombola come from for really doing this, as much as you can, albeit you're not a small organisation, but you're equally not the scale of Accenture or Sage. What tips could you give maybe to SMEs around feeling like they're able to have impact and kind of do something that's really meaningful, even if they can't resource maybe to the extent of a really large organisation?
I think it's something that's built into the culture in tombola, and it's about kind of growing the local talent pool. We put a lot of focus in that, investing in the Sunderland area, and we've done a lot in the Phil, the CEO, he's Sunderland through and through, and he really cares about the region, and that kind of flows right down through the culture here at tombola. And we've got a really close relationship with the university. We work with the university. We kind of we've often sent groups of people into the university to help with kind of judging panels on final year modules in the university projects, that kind of thing. We've had a lot of success doing that as well. We've kind of created relationships with students really early on, and we've had some of them come through in tombola, and some of them guys have been some of the best engineers we've had. So yeah, I think it's definitely easy to have an impact, as long as you care about it. I think that's the thing.
So what would you say to those people? There are some people in our poll who says they only focus on hiring people that have got 5+ years experience. What would you kind of say in response to that? Do you think that's okay, or is it almost like we're saying, is there a question mark really over that as a strategy? do you think?
Personally, no, I don't think that's okay. I mean, I'm kind of a product of being given an opportunity. So I actually reskilled when I was younger, about 13, 14 years ago. I was actually a retail manager for Ladbrokes, the betting shops, and I actually reskilled because I've always had an interest in computer science, and I reskilled, and I've had I still am having a really interesting and productive career in tech. So I'm a product of that. And if it wasn't for the organization that gave me that opportunity back then, when I wasn't the most experienced developer in the world, they kind of give me the opportunity by bringing me in an entry level role, and giving me the opportunity to kind of show them my abilities and skills, and the skills that I've learned and picked up, give me opportunities to get better. And I worked for that organization. It's a local company, C&C Group. I worked for them for about 5 years as a developer before moving on. And kind of 13 years later, I'm sitting here, looking after one of the UK's biggest bingo site. So if it was for that attitude, I wouldn't be sitting here. If everybody had to have 5 years experience, I wouldn't be sitting here personally. So I kind of feel quite strongly against that.
Yeah, I think it's a classic kind of, it's good for business and it's good for individuals, right, to really be being quite broad in your acquisition approach. And I think it pays off, but sometimes you do hear the narrative of, I don't have the time and the resources to train, but I think I just challenge that as a concept. Okay.
And I think, Kate, just on that point, if you only hire people at level from the market's not going to get any bigger, and you're going to expand the experience in the market or expand the diversity in your organization. And I think one of the things we find particularly with people who haven't worked in the industry before, they ask different questions and they challenge things in different ways, and that makes a huge difference in terms of kind of the outputs that you get as a company as well. And I think it helps you innovate more as well.
There's research that backs this up. I was reading a paper just a couple of weeks ago around one of the best diversity metrics of boards in big organizations is diversity of career background. So yeah, diversity of gender is a big focus, diversity of racial representation and so on. But actually, one of the biggest predictors of business success is diversity of career background, which resonates with me for sure, in terms of when you meet teams that are really innovative, you often see that, you just hear it in the conversations when you ask, what did you used to do? And you hear those great stories like yours, James, around, I had deep retail experience and then I switched. And so I think it's kind of, I think it still confuses me a little bit why then people stick to that idea of, I want to hire someone and to do the same thing they've just been doing, and that across everything, which feels to me like a very limiting strategy. But that makes sense. I'm conscious of time. I'm keen just to talk a little bit about the Talent Engine program that we're developing as Dynamo, and this group have all been working with me and others on developing what we really want to be doing as Dynamo in this space. And I think our overall hypothesis is just as Lindsay mentioned, which is it's kind of in our collective interest as leaders in the region to grow the workforce that is there, and that's only going to happen as rapidly as we need it to, if we all focus quite a lot on this entry to digital kind of career paths. So I'm just going to share my screen and talk briefly through some of the focus of Talent Engine. So we're working with the funding partner we're working with is North of Tyne Combined Authority, and we've got this kind of concept of what we'd like to see, which is this virtuous cycle rather than a challenging cycle, which is around collaborating within organizations to create some things we can do differently, or things we can amplify around digital workforce interventions and create more entry points into digital careers. So it's our ambition to do these 5 things, which is to create flagged digital assets and a platform for candidates. So as Dom talked about, we want to help people who are outside of our industry understand digital career pathways and find opportunities that match their skills and interests, and really remove that kind of intimidation factor. We want to help kind of organizations to amplify the impact of outreach campaigns they're already doing, or if they're not kind of knowing how to do it, navigate them towards resources or actually execute campaigns ourselves that reach target audiences where we think there is a kind of untapped opportunity. We also want to create a portal that's useful for employers. where you can advertise roles. Again, kind of linking to the first point, really just providing that platform which links employers to people who are looking for roles. And we recognise that actually quite often people gravitate towards high footfall kind of employer brands they've heard of. So they can be, it's basically making the invisible visible. So even brands like Sage aren't actually as well recognised as B2C brands. So being able to kind of leverage some of those really recognisable brands alongside SME roles, we think we'll be able to amplify the reach of SMEs. We're going to continue to work closely with training providers and education organisations to develop some of these new talent pipeline programmes. So again, you know, rather than every organisation kind of necessarily needing to kind of drive that process themselves, just being able to kind of open up some of these pipeline programmes to other employers. And then finally, we want to nurture early career and new digital talent in new roles by creating an active community and network for digital trainees across the region. I think there's a recognition that we're pretty good at networking kind of at leadership level, but it's not always easy to do that when you're a digital trainee. And I think sometimes the geography of our, you know, where our offices are and other things kind of as a city and as a group of cities doesn't always make that as easy as it is in some other places. So we're keen to kind of to work with everyone within Dynamo to create a community that's really aimed at people who are just getting started in digital careers. So really kind of the ask here is please get involved. You'll see more kind of coming through in the coming weeks as kind of funding is announced and kind of we start to really hire some roles into Dynamo to drive this program forward. But hopefully kind of that's a set of initiatives as Dynamo that will really kind of add value to both companies and drive growth, but also to the kind of people in the communities where we're all based. Just try and stop sharing my screen a second. There is a poll, a couple more polls that I have set up. I'd like to know kind of whether or not this session has helped you. I know it's been short and we've had a lot of panelists, so we haven't been able to give everybody the time. But I just keen to know whether or not this session has inspired you to consider new approaches or pathways, and also let us know if you're keen to get more involved in Dynamo's Talent Engine program. Let's see what people say. Okay, great. I think we've got just one more minute maybe before we need to wrap up. Has any of you got a burning thing you wanted to say you haven't had chance? Quick, get it in now if you have.
Dom here, just one thing from me. I think that from the analysis that we've done previously of the subjects that people study at school, there is a high correlation with the subjects that girls study rather than boys. But there's also, if you take something like psychology, it has a high proportion of girls, and it also does a load of data analysis. They don't call it data analysis. So if you want data analysts, go and hire psychologists. That's my short tip for the day. And you'll get lots of women as well.
Or biochemists, which is my background. Yeah, exactly.
Or chemistry, exactly.
Life scientists is a really well balanced kind of population. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I just could throw in a comment, we were talking about talent engine and small and large businesses. So I guess the advice that I would always give to young people is don't worry about the size of the business. Look more at the culture of the business. You can have a brilliant experience in a small business or a large business, or you can have a shit experience in a small or large business. And largely it's down to leadership and management and culture.
Yeah, I agree with that.
No, we found that. I mean, our whole philosophy is the right person on the right program, the right employer, and that triangle of confidence creates an overall positive experience. But like Dom said, if we're going to increase your safety and your reputation in tech, the work needs to be done during the initial points of secondary school, if not primary school, to work with charities and initiatives like we do to awaken and introduce them to these areas of potential, because that's the formative years that they need to be engaging with it. By the time they're at university, they've made decisions, and if we can support them at that early stage, we can at least give them all the information they need to make the decision on their future.
That's great. I think we're getting pretty much at time, and I'm sure Charlie's going to reappear shortly and take over. So thank you all for joining the panel. Everyone who's listening, thank you for listening. Do watch out for more news on the Panelists programme, as it will be coming, kind of really getting started over the next couple of months, and hopefully we can get lots of you involved in that programme to really drive impact throughout the kind of those stages of all the way from school through to people who are switching from other careers. Very good, thank you.